Seventh graders, this is Mrs. Arietta making your day 5 video, and congratulations, we finally made it to the weekend. And if you are all caught up with these videos, you should not need to do any packet work this weekend. Just a little reason to celebrate. So let's talk about the requirements of independent reading. Complete the reading log, write a reflection. It wants you to reread the excerpt from chapter 1 of the book, Brian's Return by Gary Paulsen. We'll go over why that is in a second. You need to finish your final draft today. That means rereading the explanatory article writing prompt, review the rough draft of your explanatory article from yesterday, and make revisions and compose the final draft of your essay. So I'm going to go over how to make a final draft of a handwritten essay, and then we'll talk about Brian's Return writing prompt. There's like a short paragraph type question that you're going to need to fill out. We'll treat it like a small ACE paragraph, but let's talk about the essay first. The prompt asks you to help your school science club research the topic of invasive plant species because they started appearing on campus. You were supposed to have more than one source, a developed thesis statement about the plant species, and lots of sources to support your thesis. Clearly organize your article, elaborate on your ideas, develop your ideas, and use your own words, except when you're quoting directly from the sources. So we've already gone over the structure of your essays, so I really hope that you know what each paragraph is supposed to contain. Now, we talked about radar in school before, so I'm going to remind you of the radar strategy. This is for revising your writing. Wherever you've handwritten the rough draft of your essay, you need to do this step first. Before submitting any writing assignment, use the radar strategy to focus the revision of your draft. Radar is an effective tool for improving a draft to create a much stronger piece of writing, and therefore will help to improve the grade you earn for the assignment. Radar stands for replace, add, delete, and reorder. What I need you to do is before you go writing anything into the final draft section of your packet, you need to do the radar strategy on your handwritten essay. And this is going to mean crossing things out, putting little arrows and writing things in the margin. Whatever it takes to revise your essay, you need to do it before you start copying anything down onto the final draft pages. So replace stood for the first R stood for replace. Replace means to find words that were not specific. Words like things or stuff or good. Those are kind of dead words, so you need to get rid of them and replace them with better words. A thesaurus would be very helpful here. Words that are overused. Again, use a thesaurus. If you found yourself saying benefit over and over and over, or hurts over and over again, use thesaurus. Try to find a new word to say something that you keep repeating the same word for. Sentences that are unclear. So if you're having someone read your essay, this is where having an extra set of eyes really helps. An audience member might not understand what point you were trying to make based on the way you wrote your sentence. So you should replace sentences that are not conveying your point. If a family member has read your essay and say, I don't understand this sentence, replace it with a more clear sentence. A thesaurus is really the key part of any replace section. The next thing is add. Add new details, add descriptive adjectives or adverbs. What this means is if you feel like a certain paragraph or section of a paragraph is lacking and it's not feeling like your point was well explained or filled out, add new details. Add a sentence that clarifies what you're talking about. Add when it feels like it's missing a little something. If this was a persuasive essay, I would tell you to add rhetorical devices. You could add rhetorical devices if you want to, but you don't need to in explanatory writing. And then literary devices. Literary devices like figurative language are not restricted to just narratives. If you're writing an explanatory essay, you may absolutely use similes, metaphors, personification, idioms. All of those are totally welcome in academic writing. Just make sure that it is serving a specific purpose. If you're going to use a metaphor, make sure that the metaphor is helping make your original point and it's not just thrown in there to sound pretty. The next step is to delete things that are unrelated. So maybe a sentence got a little sidetracked and it wasn't actually related to your original thesis statement. delete it. If you have two sentences where they're basically saying the same thing, it's repeating the same idea, delete the weaker sentence. If you have a sentence where when you're looking at it, you realize it's completely unnecessary for your point, maybe it's related to your topic and it's not repeating an idea, but it doesn't really make your essay any better, delete it. It's unnecessary. And then lastly, as you're reading through it, you might find that you repeated the same word twice. That's okay. This is the time to catch those little mistakes and delete them. I can't tell you how many essays I've read where the word the is repeated twice. Those little article type words are really easy to accidentally repeat within a sentence. So check for those kind of mistakes. The last R of radar is to reorder. So once you have finished all the other steps of radar and you're about ready to start copying it into the final draft section, you need to make sure that the sentences are placed in an order that makes sense. So you want to order your sentences in a way that your ideas are conveyed effectively. You want to make sure there's a logical flow to your ideas, and you want to make sure that the details are connected to your main point. Now, you can do this with arrows pointing between things. You do not need to stick with the original template I gave you, where it's main idea, evidence, explanation, evidence, explanation. If you feel like your paragraph would be stronger if you start with the evidence and then get into your main idea, that's fine, as long as it still feels like there's a logical flow to your ideas. My structure is just a recommendation, but when it comes down to your final draft, only you know the best way to convey your ideas. So once you're done with the radar steps, go ahead and resume this video, but I'm giving you a chance to pause and do your radar revisions. All right, I'm assuming that now you are ready to copy your final essay down onto the pages in your packet. That's a little scary, and you want it to look nice because this is the final draft. So back in the day when I was in middle school and we didn't always have word processing software to write our essays, we sometimes had to write essays by hand. This is the way I always learned to write a final draft, but you don't have to do it this way. This is just the way I recommend for making it look really nice on paper. The first thing you should do is take a pencil and very neatly and lightly write the whole thing down. This is where the shape of your letters is very important. You need to make sure that the letter sizing and spacing is consistent, meaning it stays the same, and that it's readable. Make sure it's big enough and it's filling the line appropriately. Back in elementary school, you learned that uppercase letters should be almost at the top, but not quite, and that lowercase letters should be about half the size of the line. Make sure you are keeping it consistent with those rules, but you're not pressing down too hard either. Once you've written the whole essay in pencil lightly, you need to proofread it one last time, and this is a great chance to have one other person reread it over one last time. Make the changes now. Don't wait until it's in pen, then it's too late. Because then you take a nice pen, maybe something that's got a fine tip to it, and write over the whole thing very gently. Don't push too hard. Make sure you don't let your hand rest on the table surface because you might smear the lead, and neatly just go over the whole thing. Wait about an hour, let the ink fully dry, and then erase any leftover pencil marks. Don't start erasing too soon because you can smear the ink. So let it dry first. If you want it to blow on the paper, it helps too. So go ahead and write that final draft if you feel like you're ready. Maybe when your ink is drying, you can come back to this video and we'll talk about the next question for Brian's return. So independently, you need to reread Brian's return and annotate the text using a highlighter or a pen or pencil and look specifically for references to Brian's previous experience in the wilderness, specifically with animals. If you find examples of wilderness skills that Brian already possessed, especially when it relates to the animals he interacts with, you need to highlight or annotate those. And you need to look for words, thoughts, feelings, pieces of dialogue that show Brian's feelings on being back in the wilderness. That's what you need to do independently. I'm giving you a second. Pause this video. All right. So there's a question that asks you about Brian's previous experience in the wilderness and what lessons he's learned about the animals. I've written some sentence starters based on the questions that they gave you, and you need to write a pretty lengthy ACE paragraph. So your first sentence can be a list. The audience can infer that in Brian's previous experience in the wilderness, you need to list 3 things that you inferred about Brian's experiences that he had in the past based on the lessons he showed. So if he behaves a certain way or does something peculiar and it's clear that he learned this lesson before, you need to infer, how did he learn that lesson? So list 3 things at the end of that first sentence that you inferred about his experiences before. Then you need to go into the citation part of your paragraph. Your sentence starter can be something like, an example of the lessons this experience taught him was when he, and this is where you have to quote or paraphrase part of Brian's return, where he's showing that lesson. He's showing what he learned before. You're going to have to do this 3 times. It wants you to be looking for 3 examples. So you could say 1 example, another example, the last example. You should have either 3 sentences or you can kind of start to combine them, but the best way, the most consistent way to do it is to say 1 example, another example, the last example. Lastly, you need to explain why Brian is glad to be back or not glad to be back. So you're going to pick which one he is and say, Brian is glad to be back because, explain your reasoning, or Brian is not glad to be back because, and then explain your reasoning. With these sentence starters, you should be able to write a pretty good ACE paragraph, a long ACE paragraph, but an ACE paragraph nonetheless, about Brian's experience with the wilderness and with the animals. Good luck with it. I'm sorry that you had so much writing to do today, but luckily you have all weekend if you aren't able to finish it all. You can catch up, and I will see you back on Monday for day 6 of your 10-day packet. Bye, and good luck.